This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi Glatstein. Welcome everyone to the Kollel Agada Perka here in Kew Garden Hills, New York. My voice today is a little tenuous, so bear with me. The Gemara says in Masechta Bava Basra, the Gemara is talking about the various Svarim of the Tanakh, Chaf Dalet Svarim. The pasuk says in Kisisa, Vayitein al Moshe kechaloisai ledaber itai. And Rashi says, Kechaloisai Lashon Kala. Ma Kala Mekushetes B'Chavdalad Kishutin. Just like a bride is, or she has 24 ornaments, so too a Talmud Chacham has to be a baki in the Chavdalad Sifrei Kodesh, the 24 books. So the Gemara goes through the 24 books, and the Gemara says, Umi Kasvan, who wrote them? Moshe Kasav Sifrei Parshas Bilam. Moshe wrote his book, and the Parsha of Bilam. I believe last time we discussed what does it mean, Parshas Bilam, but we skipped the first part. What does it mean, Moshe Kasav Sifrei? Moshe wrote his book. What's his book? The great autobiography of Moshe Rabbeinu. What is the book of Moshe? What do you mean, his book? Well, says the Gemara Bava Basra, Daf Yudal Amud Beis, Moshe wrote his book. The Iyun Yaakov brings down that in his opinion, the das of Rashi is that what does it mean, Moshe Kasav Sifrei? Sifrei refers to Devarim, Mishnah Torah, because this book is called by Moshe's name, where it says Zichru Torahs Moshe. Mashein came the rest of the Torah. The rest of the Torah is not Torahs Moshe. The rest of the Torah preceded the world 2,000 years, as we find that if you look at the end of Sefer Bamidbar. So if you look at the end of Sefer Bamidbar, the pasuk says that what? Eila ha-mitzvos v'ha-mishpatim asher tziva Hashem b'yad Moshe el b'nei Yisrael. Bamidbar ends, these are the mitzvos and the mishpatim that Hashem commanded. And Devarim begins, Eila ha-dvarim asher diber Moshe. So the difference between the first four books and the fifth are the first four books are the books of God. Those books were published 2,000 years before the world was created. And a newly released edition of the Torah was produced in the 40th year in the 11th month, like Devarim begins, Eila hadvarim asher diber Moshe. Okay, very good. The question though is, we know there are 5 books of the Torah. There's no difference in Kedusha between the first 4 books and the 5th book. So what does it mean? Why are we calling the 5th book Moshe's book? In what way is it Moshe's book? How is it any different than the first 4 books? Incredibly, there's a concept of a get, where a person could use a certain type of document to sever the formal relationship that husband has with a wife. And Tosfos, the first Tosfos in Gittin, brings down that a get has to have 12 lines. Tosfos wants to know, why does a get have 12 lines? Well, the reason why there are 12 lines in a get, the numerical value of get, not G-E-T, but Gimel Tes, is 12, and therefore a get has to have 12 lines. Right? It's a good thing we spell get with a tes and not a taf. But a get has to have 12 lines, because get is Gematria 12. V'ri Shama V'Shem Rav Haigain. The Ri heard from, in the name of Rav Haigain, V'Shem Rabbeinu Sadia, that a get has 12 lines, Mishum D'chsiv Sefer Krisos. It says by a get that a get is a book of severance. Kishir Yudbeis Shitin Hamapsikin Bein Arba Chumshei Sefer Torah. That the reason why a get has to have 12 lines is because a get is called the book of cutting off, and there are 12 cutting offs in the Torah. What are they? There are 4 lines of space between Bereshis and Shemais. If you open up a Sefer Torah, you'll see there are 4 lines of space between Bereshis and Shemais. There are 4 lines of space between Shemais and Vayikra. There are 4 lines of space between Vayikra and Bamidbar. According to higher mathematics, 4 plus floor plus floor is 12. Amazing, is 12. So that is why a get has 12 lines. Kida Amar Baba Basra Shatzarch Lahaniach Arba Shitin Bein Kol Sefer V'Sefer. The obvious question is, what about the 4 lines between Bamidbar and Devarim? V'hefsek shebein v'yidaber l'mishnah Torah loy chashav. We're not counting the 4 lines between Bamidbar and Devarim. You know why? Because Devarim don't count. You know why Devarim don't count? She'enoi ela chayzer v'shayna ma shelamala. Devarim is just a review of the first 4 books. So Devarim doesn't count because Devarim is only a review. And Chazar doesn't count. What? Scream? Scream is very harsh. But still, it's... Yeah, so what does Tosfos mean? Devarim is only a review of the first 4 books. Is that even true? Does anybody know how many mitzvahs are in Sefer Devarim? So we have over here from Rav Shamshon Rafal Hirsch that over just 100 laws which are contained in this book, so in other words, about 100 new mitzvahs, there are 100 mitzvahs b'chlal, 70 are new. That's a review. That means there are 513 mitzvahs in the other books. There are 100 in Devarim. 70 of them are new. They're only a repetition of 30. That's a review. What kind of review is that? For example, there are 70 that are not contained. Shema, the mitzvah of saying Shema, that's a pretty important mitzvah. Lo yischatein, not marrying a non-Jew. Isser hanav avodah zara, berchas hamazon, v'hayim shamaya, and so on and so on. There are 70 new mitzvahs. Amalek, Bikurim, B'idei Meiser, Ksiva Sefer Torah, Hakel, marriage, divorce, all Shivim mitzvahs. On the other hand, we have over here, says Rav Shamshon Hirsch, we have about 30 mitzvahs that are repeated. Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkos, Moilech, Nichosh, Kishuf, Reitzeach, B'Shogeg. By the way, that's not a mitzvah, that one's an Avera. Hashavas Aveda, Shatnez, Tzitzis, and so on and so forth. So why then would we call Sefer Devarim just a repetition of the earlier mitzvahs? Now, Mishnah Torah alone doesn't necessarily mean review. Mishnah can mean learning, it can mean repetition. But for Tosfos to say that the reason why a get has 12 lines and not 16 lines is because Sefer Devarim is just a repetition of the earlier Sefer, is that really accurate? There are 100 mitzvahs and 70 of them are new. So, B'chlal, so what is Mishnah Torah? So Rav Shamshon Rafal Hirsch explains in his inimitable way that the function of Sefer Devarim is different than the first 4 books. The first 4 books were more focused on the existence of the Jewish people in the Midbar, in a bubble, in a world where all their needs are provided, where they don't have to make a livelihood, where they don't have to plant and plow and harvest and reap. They don't have to wage war. The concept of a king perhaps is not necessary. And then because of the sins of the Meraglim, the Jewish people were now thrust into a new existence, and they were not living a supernatural life, and they need to go into Eretz Yisrael, and now Olam Kimin Hagay Noheg, and they're going to have to wage wars and fight battles, and the mitzvahs of Sefer Devarim were the mitzvahs they needed to focus on entering the new existence of Eretz Yisrael. But again, that's not what Tosfos says. What Tosfos says is that Mishnah Torah is just Chayzer v'Shayna ma shalamala. It's not even true. There are 513 mitzvahs. There are 30 mitzvahs that are repeated. You want me to say all 30, or let's say 10 of them? 1? Pesach, Shavuos. You know what? I'm going to tell you all 30. Dayanim, Pesel, Asar, they don't let. But I will tell you, okay? So I'm just telling you. I refer you to number 4 in the second paragraph. There you will see all 30 examples, and you could review it as many times until you know it by heart. And okay. But Marv Rabbi says, so what is the meaning of Tosfos that Sefer Devarim is merely a repetition? You have 513 mitzvahs in the first 4 books. Only 30 are repeated. What percent is 30 out of 500? You know? No. A very small percentage. Less, about 5%, right? Okay, 6%. That you wouldn't call that a repetition, right? I wouldn't call that a repetition. So amazingly, one of the most difficult Sfarim to understand and to wrap your minds around, and when you read the Sefer, you have such Chalishas Hadas. Everybody knows Rav Moshe as the great Posek, but when you learn the Dibros Moshe on Shas, you see that we don't even come to the toenails of Rav Moshe and his understanding of any sugya. Rav Moshe has such long essays on sugyas that nobody comes close to. In the Dibros Moshe, Masechta Gittin, Rav Moshe Feinstein Zechasag Baruch is bothered by this question. Rav Moshe says, and Rav Moshe has a different calculation than Rav Shamshin Fal Hirsch. He says there are 200 mitzvahs that are new in Mishnah Torah that do not exist anywhere else in the Torah. Amazing. That actually 1/3 of the 613 mitzvahs appear only in Sefer Devarim and appear nowhere else. And these are not just secondary mitzvahs, if we could say such a thing. These are ikarim, kriya shema, tefillah, mezuzah, kedushin, yibum, edus, malchus. These mitzvahs appear only in Sefer Devarim. How then could Tosfos say that a get is 12 lines and we don't have to count the 4 lines between Bamidbar and Devarim because only repetition, it's not a repetition. So Rav Moshe says something that's very difficult to understand. Rav Moshe says like this. The Gemara says in Adarim that had Klal Yisrael not sinned, we would have only been given Chamisha Chumshei Torah and Sefer Yehoshua. But because of the sin, we needed a lot of rebuke. And that rebuke is in Sefer Devarim. Because that rebuke is in Sefer Devarim, the mitzvahs of the Torah were scattered over the 5 books of the Torah. However, had the Jewish people not sinned, all Egel and Meraglim, had we not sinned, all 613 mitzvahs would have been in the first 4 books. And Sefer Devarim would have only been a repetition, and there would have been no rebuke in Sefer Devarim. But now that we sinned, so the Sefer Devarim is full of rebuke. Since it's full of rebuke, there's no space to review. And since there's no space to review, all the mitzvahs are scattered over the Torah. So when Tosfos says Sefer Devarim is merely a repetition of the first 4, he doesn't mean it's a repetition of the first 4. What does he mean? It would have been a repetition of the first 4, had we not sinned. But now that we sinned, it's not a repetition. There's a lot of new information. So you have to read Tosfos like this. The hefsek between Bamidbar and Devarim is not counted because in its pure form, it should have only been a repetition of what it said in the first 4 books. But in reality, in no way is it a repetition. There are 200 new mitzvahs, and the mitzvahs had to be scattered. But had we not sinned, Sefer Devarim, there would have been a lot of extra room to review the rest of the Torah, and then all 613 would have been in the first 4, and Mishnah Torah would have just been a repetition. But now that we sinned, there's no room to put repetition in Devarim, and all the mitzvahs are scattered over the first 5. That is the explanation of Rav Moshe. Also, pretty novel interpretation of Tosfos. That's what Tosfos means. When Tosfos says it's only a repetition, he means it would have, it could have, it should have. You know, it's not something that I don't think we would have said. But Azoi Zokt Rav Moshe. Okay, Rabbi Sai, what we want to explore today is the nature of Sefer Devarim. What is it? What is Mishnah Torah? So let's begin with a Gemara Masechta Megillah. Says the Gemara on Daf Lamed Aleph and Beis, the Gemara says that when you're laning the Teichacha, of which there are 2 of, there's one in Bechukaisai, and there's one in Kisavai. The Gemara says you're not allowed to pause in the Teichacha. Why? Because you can't make a bracha and then lane the Teichacha. How incongruous it would be to make a bracha on Psukim of Klala. So therefore you need to start a pasuk earlier and end the pasuk after. Says the Gemara, Marabaye, Loishanu, Ela Beklala, Shebetoras Chayanim. This is only the Teichacha of Vayikra, Aval Klalos Sheba Mishnah Torah. The curses of Devarim, Paisek, you're allowed to stop. My taima, what's the reason? Halalu B'lashon Rabim Amurais. The Teichacha of Vayikra is very severe. Why? It's said in Lashon Rabim. U'Moshe mipi hagvura amran. Moshe said it from God. So the Teichacha of Sefer Vayikra is very severe. It talks about plural. nobody could excuse themselves. Why? Because he could say it's to everybody, it's to every Jew. Nobody could say it doesn't apply to me. And Moshe said it from God. But v'halalu Sefer Devarim b'lashon yachid amurais. Sefer Devarim, the Teichacha of Sefer Devarim, Moshe said it on his own. Moshe said it on his own. Herstamais over here. Moshe said the Teichacha. Yad beik Hashem. Hashem will do this. Moshe, who told you? Moshe said it, decided on his own that the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to do this and this if we don't listen. The lashon of the Gemara is Moshe mipi atzmai amran. And the Gemara says, their Lashon Yachid. It said to the Yachid. So each Yachid could say, I don't pay membership, so it doesn't apply to me. So that's the difference between Vayikra and Devarim. So the Gemara continues. You'll not interrupt. So the Gemara says, Levi Barbuti have a kari. Levi Barbuti would read, become a gam game, Kamed Rav Huna. And he would stumble and mumble the Teichacha. He would not pronounce the words clearly. Be'aruri. Amar Loi. Rav Huna said, Akanavshach, do whatever you want, but you don't need to be doing this. The only thing you need to be afraid of is the klalos of Vayikra. You could interrupt the klalos of Mishnah Torah. Why? Because Moshe said it on his own. What does it mean that Moshe said the Teichacha of Mishnah Torah on his own? We have another Gemara. A Gemara in Yevamos on Daf Daled. Yeah? Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef said, Afilu laman doloi darish smuchim. Even the opinion that does not darshan smuchim. What does it mean to darshan smuchim? To figure out why did the Rebbeinu Shalom juxtapose Pasuk Aleph to Pasuk Beis, Pasuk Tes to Pasuk Yud. There are some Tanoim that make a big deal out of smuchim, and some Tanoim that are not doiresh smuchim. Even the man Amar that's not doiresh smuchim, says the Gemara, b'Mishnah Torah dorish. They are doiresh smuchim in Mishnah Torah. Why? Daha Rabbi Yehuda ba'alma loy dorish. Rabbi Yehuda in general is not doiresh smuchim. Over Mishnah Torah dorish. And in Sefer Devarim, Rabbi Yehuda is doiresh smuchim. Psukim are our sources. What? So the Gemara says that even if you are not Dorish Smuchim in the first 4 books, you would be Dorish in Devarim. Namely, Rabbi Yehuda is Dorish in Devarim and not elsewhere. So the question is why? What's the nafkamina? Why would you only be Dorish juxtaposition in Devarim and not elsewhere? So Tosfos says it's not really nothing special about Devarim. It happens to be that in Devarim, either the pasuk is extra, or there's an indication that we need to be Darish Smuchim. And elsewhere, it's not extra, and there is no indication. But in a Chanami, if it would be extra elsewhere, or if there would be indication elsewhere, we would be darshaning it elsewhere. Meaning, according to Tosfos, there is nothing special about Sefer Devarim. It's just that it happens to be in Devarim, it's either what is called Muchach or Mufna, and elsewhere it's not Muchach or Mufna. However, the Ra'avan Shita is that no, he argues on Tosfos, and the Ra'avan is quoted in the Hagos of Rabbi Tzalel Ranshberg, that no, in Devarim we are always Doresh Smuchim, and elsewhere we are not Doresh Smuchim. So the question would be, why would that be? Why would we only darshan Smuchim in Devarim and not elsewhere? Yeah, everybody with me? Everybody's up? I cannot use my voice to modulate to keep you up today. So you're going to have to do it on your own. What? An example of smuchim is, for example, it says, V'haya im bin hakois harasha, which is malkois, and juxtaposed to that is, Loisachsim shar b'dishai. So from there we learn that you only get malchus for a lav sheyesh by maisa. But there are many examples of smuchim. Look over there in Yevamos. Okay? So you know the answer. What? Yeah, that's one of the Gedilim Taslach is one of the examples. Gedilim, that's a sugya. The sugya over there. So that's a sugya over there. I say doichalois. I say is a sugya over there in Yevamos. Good. Okay. So So the question is, according to Tosfos, there's nothing specific about Mishnah Torah. It just happens to be, we know that in Mishnah Torah, it's always extra or always muchach, and elsewhere it's not always, but if it would be, you would darshan smuchim. The Ravan disagrees, and the Ravan says that in Mishnah Torah we always darshan, and elsewhere we don't darshan. The question is, why? Okay. Comes the Dubna Maggid, and maybe before we proceed, we'll ask some other questions. If you want to be a good Rebbe, and you want to be a good Maggid Shir, what is the most important quality you need to have? Patience. What? Nah, it's not Ma'akev. What's the most important thing? What's the most important quality? You have to speak clearly. If you can't speak clearly, then nobody knows what you're talking about. So even if you don't know what you're talking about, at least other people should think you know what you're talking about, right? So, and yet, the greatest Rebbe we ever had is Moshe Rabbeinu, and who was proficient in every single aspect of Torah and every midah tova. And just like V'yish Moshe Anav Ma'od Mikol Adam Asher Pnei Adama, Rabbeinu Yonah writes, he equally excelled in every good character trait, and his only deficiency was he couldn't speak. He couldn't speak. You couldn't understand the word he said. Why would the Rebbe Shem create Moshe Rabbeinu with such a deficiency? One very interesting thing is, the Medrash says in this week's Parsha, Parshas Devarim, on the Pasuk in Mishlei, Marpe, Lashon, Eitz, Chayim, that the Torah is a healing for the tongue. Ein Eitz Chayim Ela Torah, that when Moshe Rabbeinu taught Sefer Devarim, he was healed. At Moshe Rabbeinu taught Sefer Devarim, he was healed. On Har Sinai, he was still a Kvad Peh, a Kvad Lashon. Look at number 10.
Everyone healed at Har Sinai?
Not Moshe Rabbeinu. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Re'ei l'shoino shel Torah ma chaviva, shemerape es halashon, minayin sheken ksiv, marpe lashon eitz chayim, v'ein eitz chayim ela Torah, shenemar eitz chayim hi, Lamachazigim ba. Reb Levi Amar Ma lanu lilmod mimakam acher nilmod mimakoymai. Harei Moshe ad shaloi zacha la Torah ksiv bai lo yish devarim anoichi. Kivan shezacha la Torah. Once Moshe was zacha to Torah nisrape. Now you would say maybe when he taught the Torah in Har Sinai, no. Minayin eila hadevarim asher Diber Moshe. That means that not until Moshe taught the Torah in this week's Parsha was he healed. Marv Rabbeisai, isn't it a pele? Why, of all deficiencies, would the Rebbe Shalom make Moshe Rabbeinu a Kvad Peh, a Kvad Lashon? And why was he dafka healed in Sefer Devarim? Well, says the Dubna Maggid, Oyoim V'noira. An incredible thing. Says the Dubna Maggid. Which one? Says the Dubna Maggid in number 9 in the Oyel Yaakov. Says the Dubna Maggid that the Rebbeinu Shalom made Moshe Rabbeinu a Kvad Peh and a Kvad Lashon for a very important reason. What's that? The entire Torah stands on the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu could not speak. If you would go over to Moshe Rabbeinu and you would want to shoot the breeze, you would not understand one word he said. And the Rebbeinu Shalom Dafka made him that way for a very important tachlis. What's the tachlis? Tachlis like this. That when Moshe Rabbeinu teaches the Torah, how does Klal Yisrael know that this is the Dvar Hashem and Moshe Rabbeinu not making it up? The answer is because Moshe Rabbeinu could not get a word out of his mouth. But when he came to teach Torah to Klal Yisrael, Moshe yedaber v'Elokim yanenu b'koyal. Moshe wasn't speaking. It was the Rebbeinu Shem speaking out of the voice box of Moshe. And Klal Yisrael heard beautiful words, clear words, melodic words. And Klal Yisrael understood that this is not Moshe teaching Torah. It's Shechina medaberes mitoch groino shel Moshe. So you say, what's the raya? Shechina medaberes mitoch groino shel Moshe. Maybe Moshe Rabbeinu was just a good speaker and he had a beautiful pitched voice and a melodic voice. How do we know this is Shechina medaberes mitoch groino shel Moshe? The answer is because Moshe Rabbeinu was not able to get one word out of his mouth. So what's the pshat all of a sudden? He's teaching Torah and he speaks so beautifully. The answer is Rebbeinu Shalom was teaching Klal Yisrael, Anoichi Eya Impicha. Eya Impicha doesn't mean I'm going to help you speak. It means Ani Ba'atzmi Adaber Migroincha. An amazing thing that you learn from here a great lesson. Sometimes a person has a deficiency and you say, Oy vey, why? Rebbeinu Shem has very important cheshbonos why he made this deficiency. Can you imagine? Moshe Rabbeinu went his whole life. He never understood why did Rebbeinu Shem make me a kvad peh, kvad lashon. Turns out he made him a kvad peh, kvad lashon for the most grandiose purpose in history, so that Klal Yisrael should have emunah in the Torah. It says the Dubna Maggid. This is only why was this necessary? So that Klal Yisrael should have emunah in the Torah. But once Moshe Rabbeinu already gave the Torah to Klal Yisrael, the deficiency was completely unnecessary anymore. Once he taught Bereshis, Shemos, Vayikra, and Bamidbar, there was no need to authenticate and verify the Torah. So now the Rebbeinu Shem could heal Moshe Rabbeinu, and in fact, that is what happened. That when it came to Sefer Devarim, where now this is not the Devar Hashem anymore, and we'll have to explain what that means. Now Moshe Rabbeinu didn't need to be a Kvad Peh, Kvad Lashon. Now it's Marpe Lashon Eitz Chayim. Moshe Rabbeinu was cured, and he was able to teach Sefer Devarim beautifully and clearly. In fact, says the Dubna Maggid, that on that great day that Moshe and Aaron appeared at Paro's birthday party, why didn't Paro command, get rid of these guys, off with their head? What a chutzpah. Who do these guys think they are to disturb me as my birthday cake is coming in? I'm about to blow out the candles. And the answer is, says the Dubna Maggid, Paro heard Moshe Rabbeinu stumble and mumble his whole life, and all of a sudden he knocks on the door. Koi Amar Hashem b'ni b'chayri Yisrael. Say what? Paro was flabbergasted. He saw the supernatural communication emanating from the voice box of Moshe Rabbeinu. He was so startled. He was so moved that he had some hachna to Moshe Rabbeinu. Says the Dubna Maggid more than Bilam by the donkey. Here it's Shechina medaberes mitoch asoinoi shel Bilam, and Bilam talks back. This is what you do. And here Paro at least had a little more derech eretz than Bilam. Says the Dubna Maggid, I asked, Moiri v'Rabbi, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, HaGoin, HaChassid. Who is the Rebbe of the Dubna Maggid? The Vilna Gaon, Marenu Harav Eliyahu mi Vilna. What's the difference between the Torah and the Mishnah Torah? Says the Heilige Vilna Gaon, listen carefully. When Yeshaya spoke Nevuah, was God speaking out of the voice box of Yeshaya? No. And when Yirmiyah taught Nevuah, was it the Rebbeinu Shem talking about the voice box? No. And when the Nevi'im spoke Nevuah, it wasn't. How was it? Hashem came to the Navi, told him the Nevuah, and then the Navi related. The first 4 books of the Torah were Shechina medaberes mitoch groinoi shel Moshe. It was the word of the Rebbeinu Shem emanating from the voice box of Moshe. However, Sefer Devarim, it was not that way. Sefer Devarim, Moshe Rabbeinu was already cured. Hashem told the Nevuah to Moshe the same way he would tell any other Navi, and then Moshe repeated it word for word. But it wasn't direct from God through the voice box of Moshe. It was Rebbeinu Shem to Moshe, and Moshe relayed it. By the way, I would add now, is Sefer Devarim more holy than Yehoshua, Shoftim, Yirmiyah, Yeshaya, Yecheskel? Yeah. But why? They're all Nevuah. If it's not Shechina Medaberes, why does Sefer Devarim, why does Mishnah Torah have Kedushas Torah and not Kedushas Nevuah?
Because the Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu.
The answer is because the Nevuah of Moshe was on a higher level than the Nevuah of Yeshaya Yirmiyah Chesed. The Nevuah of Moshe was Asbaklaria HaMe'ira, and the Nevuah of the other Nevi'im was Asbaklaria She'ena Me'ira. But still, there is a difference between the first 4 books and Devarim. First 4 books is God speaking directly out of Moshe's voice box. Why did Hashem do that? So Klal Yisrael should be makir. It's not the Divrei Moshe, it's the Dvar Hashem. The 5th book, Moshe already did that. Now it's Rebbe Shem coming to Moshe, and Moshe saying it over. Says the Dubna Maggid, this explains
why Moshe had to be kvat pei at the beginning.
This explains why the Gemara says in Masechta Megillah that the klalos of Torah's Kohanim was Moshe mipi hagvura Amron, and the klalos of Mishnah Torah Moshe mipi atzmai. What does it mean, Moshe mipi atzmai? Chas Hashem doesn't mean Moshe said it on his own? Of course not. What it means is Hashem told him, and then Moshe independently said it over with his own faculty of speech, as opposed to the first 4 books. It wasn't the faculty of speech of Moshe Rabbeinu, it was the Rebbe Shem speaking out of his voice box. Says, if you look on the footnote of the Sefer Oyal Yaakov, look at the end of number 9, Amar HaKosev, I looked in the Adaras Eliyahu, and I did not find anything of which the Dubna Maggid says, the Vilna Gaon said. Again, it's not a question. The Dubna Maggid is telling us what the Gaon told him in personal conversation. However, if you look in the Maral of Prague, on the Gemara Megillah, on Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Beis, Ein Mafsikin B'Klalos, and the Gemara says that's only the Klalos of Torah's Kohanim, but not the Klalos of Mishnah Torah. Why? Halalu mipi HaKadosh Baruch Hu nemru, v'halalu Moshe mipi atzman. What does that mean, Moshe mipi atzman? The answer is, Moshe said it with his own faculty of speech. It was not Shechina midaberes mitoich groino shel Moshe. So now, look at number 11. I'm going to share with you the Haggais of Rabbi Tzalel Ransberg on the Gemara Yevamos. We pointed out that the Shita of Tosfos is that really there's nothing special about Devarim. It happens to be in Devarim, there's always a reason to darshan smuchim, because it's always mufna or muchach, and elsewhere it's not. But the Ravan says no. Period, we only darshan smuchim in Devarim, we don't darshan smuchim elsewhere. What's the explanation of that? So says the Haggais, Rabbi Tzal Ransberg, the rest of the Torah are just the words of Hashem. And God is speaking out of the voice box of Moshe. Do we know why God put something in one order or the other order? No. Ein muktam u'mu'achar b'Torah. We are not authorized to ask, why did Hashem say this now? Why did Hashem put the second thing then? Why did Hashem put the 2 things together? Nistarei darkei Hashem. The ways of God are hidden. We're not allowed to ask. God is not subject to human order. So therefore, in the first 4 books, we cannot ask and we cannot darshan smuchim. But Sefer Devarim is Moshe relaying to us in his own words what Hashem said. Well, Moshe, then we could ask, why did Moshe choose to tell it to us in this Seder, according to this sequence of Psukim? We are authorized to darshan the way Moshe was Mesader Sefer Devarim. However, let's take a look at the words of Rabbi Tzal Ransberg in number 11. He says, Tosfos says there's nothing particular of why we darshan smuchim in Devarim and not elsewhere. Nichta b'tzidai aval haravan in Siman Lamadal, Daf Yudal Lamadal, b'Sefer Kasav, Dedavka b'Mishnah Torah darish, v'loy b'chol ha-Torah, v'taima mishum d'chol ha-Torah mipi hagvura nemar. The rest of the Torah is the word of Hashem. Ve'ein muktam u'mu'achar. Aval Moshe shasider Mishnah Torah, Moshe arranged Mishnah Torah, Parsha achar Parsha, one Parsha after another, loy sidar ela lidrash. He only arranged it that way to be able to darshan. Okay, Mar Rabbi Sai, I'm going to share with you now one of my all-time favorite Divrei Torah, and this fits beautifully into what we're saying. So we say every morning right before Yishtabach, Oz, Yashir, Moshe. Oz. What does the word Oz mean? Then. Says Rashi, Oz kishara hanes. Then, when they saw the miracle, Allah beliba sheyasher, it entered their mind to sing. So the question is, no kidding. Obviously, if they sang, it entered their mind to sing. You can't do most people are not able to do things if it didn't enter their mind. I know some people, they could say things without thinking, but most regular people, they're not going to talk unless it first entered their mind to say. So what's the chiddush? The Torah wrote the word uz to teach you that it entered their mind to sing. That's the kasha, the Shem Yishmael. I have another kasha. You have how many Jews singing Shira? 600,000. Could someone please tell me how it's possible that all 600,000 Jews spontaneously came up with the same song? I mean, 2 Jews, 3 opinions, and you have 600,000 Jews, and they all mysteriously came up with the exact same words. Shira, Lashem, Ki, Ga'ai, Ga'a, Sus, Veroichvai, Rama. How's that possible? There's a klal. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin Daf Peites, Ein Shnei Nevi'im Misnavim B'Signoin Echad. You'll never have 2 Nevi'im that are prophecy with the same arrangement and the same technique and the same way. What does it mean that each and every Jew all prophesied with the same exact prophecy? Another question. There was a Navi by the name of Amais. Amais was a kavad peh. He had a lisp. So instead of saying the word boilesh, the Gemara says he said boiles. What do you see from there? That you could be a great Navi. However, if you don't have the faculty of speech, you will not be able to pronounce the words. Now the Gemara says in Ksubis, it's also the Gemara in Brachos, that b'makelos baruchu es Hashem, afilu ubarin shebemei iman amru shira alayam. Even embryos sang Shira. Just one simple question for you. If Amos could not pronounce the letter Shin because he had a lisp, which shows that you need to have the faculty of speech to say Nevuah, then how did embryos in their mother's stomach, whose mouths are sealed shut, sing Shira? Says the Heilig Hashem Yishmael like this. There are 2 types of prophecy. There's the prophecy of other Nevi'im and the prophecy of Moshe. What's the main difference between the prophecy of other Nevi'im and the prophecy of Moshe? We just learned in last week's Parsha. Right? What do we say? There's another difference. What? It's the beginning of Parshas Matos. The pasuk says, "Zeh hadavar asher tziva Hashem." Says Rashi, all the other Nevi'im were misnabe with the word Kai. Kai amar Hashem. Very good. Kai. They say Kai. But Moshe Rabbeinu was nesnave with the word Zeh. Which Zeh is Moshe. What's the difference between Kai and Zeh? Zeh means this is exactly what Hashem said. You know how Moshe was able to say this is exactly what Hashem said? Because Hashem was talking. Hashem was talking out of his voice box. Every other Navi is repeating over what the Rebbe Hashem told them. So they can't say exactly, they could say Kai be'erach. Ayim v'noira, when Klal Yisrael were crossing the sea, Zeh ke'livi anvehu. Zeh? How could they say Zeh? The answer is Ra shivcha alayam ashaloi ra Yecheskel ben Buvi. That means they didn't have the nevuah of Yecheskel, they had the nevuah of Moshe. The nevuah of Moshe is not Hashem coming to tell you nevuah and then you say it with your own faculties. It's a nevuah of Zeh. You don't have to have the faculty of speech to say over the nevuah of Moshe. V'haraya, Moshe was a kvad peh, kvad loshen, and he was able to speak clearly. Memela, Hashem came to every single Jew and every ubar, and he said nevuah. The ubar can't talk. That's if the ubar is talking on his own. But now the ubar is not speaking nevuah like Yeshaya, Yirmiyah, Yecheskel. Now the ubar, the Rebbe Hashem is merely speaking out of the voice box of the ubar. That's why it's Zeh ke'livi anvehu. How did every Jew say the exact same nevuah? Because it was Hashem talking out of their voice box. Hashem talking out of their voice box. So I have a kasha for you. If you're just sitting there like a complete goylam, imagine you have a guy sleeping, and the Rebbe Hashem says nevuah out of your voice box, you're going to get credit for it. You didn't do anything. It must be, why do we credit Az Yashir to Klal Yisrael? Because even though they didn't do anything, they wanted to. That's why the Shira begins, Az Allah b'libai sheyashir. It entered their mind to sing Shira. So they're being credited now with saying it, because that wasn't them. They're being credited with making the decision to want to say it. But again, this is an example of what we call Shechina medaberes mitoch groinoi shel Moshe, or in this instance, Shechina medaberes mitoch groinam shel Klal Yisrael. By the way, so it comes out, the first 4 books of the Torah are Shechina medaberes mitoch groinoi shel Moshe, and Sefer Devarim is what? Moshe speaking on his own. I will point out that Rabbi Yaakov Emden, in his footnotes on Masechta Sanhedrin, Daf Tzadi Tes, says clearly that everything we said today is wrong. But that's fine, because the Vilna Gaon says it. Vilna Gaon, but Rabbi Yaakov Emden disagrees with what we said. Rabbi Yaakov Emden says, Afilu, look at number 14, Afilu b'toichachais shabai, aval shchina medaberes mitoich groinoi, if you lane Sefer Devarim, says Rabbi Yaakov Emden, it's clear that this is not Moshe mipi atzmai, but it's Shechina medaberes. For example, by the Teichacha, Asher azav ta ni. Moshe is saying, Hashem's going to do this because you forsook me. No. It should say, Asher azavtem es Hashem. That indicates, says Rabbi Yaakov Emden, that this in fact is Shechina medaberes mitach groinoi shel Moshe. But again, this is the parish of the Vilna Gaon and the Maharal. I'll tell you one other thing about Sefer Devarim, an interesting idea. You know, Bereshis begins with the word Bereshis. How does Shemos begin? Ve'ela. With the letter? And how does Vayikra begin? With the letter? And how does Bamidbar begin? Vayedaber, with the letter. And how about Devarim? Eila. So says Rabbeinu B'chai, that teaches you that the first 4 books are all connected and of one nature. Sefer Devarim begins sort of a new chapter. It's not a connection. It's Davar B'fnei Atzmai, therefore it doesn't begin with the Ois Vav. What? Bereshis is the beginning. Starts with the beginning. It's not connected to anything. It's the beginning. By the way, so we said one pshat why Moshe Rabbeinu was a kvad per kvad lashon, so that Klal Yisrael should see clearly that when he teaches Torah, these are not his own words, but these are the words of Rebbe Sham. There's a famous parish of the Ran who says slightly different, as what you were saying before, that even though it's very important for a Rebbe to speak clearly, but the Rebbe Sham did not want Moshe's talent to be in speaking. You know why? You have some people, they're such good speakers, they could get up and they could convince you to do anything. By the end of the drasha, you're willing to buy the Brooklyn Bridge off them, you're willing to pay them a mortgage, and all cash. You're ready to come in with a suitcase. So had Moshe Rabbeinu been a good persuasive speaker, we might have thought, you know why Klal Yisrael were makabel the Torah? Moshe was such a sensational speaker. He wowed them. He told them maisa, and he jokes and humor, and you know how it goes. And he convinced, he persuaded Klal Yisrael to be Makabel the Torah. The Rebbe Shem wanted to demonstrate that Klal Yisrael were Makabel the Torah based on its own merit, because of the content alone and not because of the presentation. And therefore, the Rebbe Shem B'davka made Moshe Rabbeinu kvad peh, kvad lashon, so that we realize that we were Makabel the Torah for its own merit. Let me end off with one beautiful Vilna Gaon. We say in Tehillim in chapter 99, in Perek Tzadi Tes, we say this in the Kabbalah Shabbos, Moshe v'Aaron b'chayhanav, Moshe and Aaron among his kayhanim, u'Shmuel b'karei Shemai. And from here we learn, this was the mistake of Kairach, that Shmuel is Shakal Keneged Moshe and Aaron. But how could that be? Moshe and Aaron were the greatest people who ever lived. In what way would Shmuel be equal to Moshe and Aaron? Well, says the Heilige of Vilna Gaon, we all know the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu was that not only was he a Navi, but it's Shechina medaberes mitoich groino shel Moshe Rabbeinu. That attribute we find on occasion by Aaron HaKohen. When? Kishahayu shaimim, right, help me out. My voice is not so good today, yeah? Es Hashem, right? You know the whole thing. Yotzei, right? Yotzei implies sheyatza me'atzmai. the name went out on its own. Says the Gaon, what do you mean it went out on its own? That when Aaron said the Shem HaMefayrash, it wasn't him who enunciated the word, but it was Shechina Medaberes Mitach Groinai. Says the Gaon, there is one instance in the Nevuah of Shmuel that Shmuel was also Zoicha to Shechina Medaberes Mitach Groinai. In Sefer Shmuel, Parak Aleph, Shmuel Aleph, Parak Yud Beis, Pasuk Yud Aleph, it says, Vayishlach Hashem es Yerubal. This is Shmuel talking. God sent Yerubal, Ves Bedan, Ves Yiftach, Ves Shmuel. What do you mean Ves Shmuel? This is Shmuel talking. It should say Ve Oisi. Hashem sent Yerubal, Bedan, Yiftach, and me. What do you mean Ves Shmuel? Elamai, at that instance, when Shmuel was giving rebuke, Shmuel was Zoicha. Be'esha kara es Shemoi. When Shmuel said his name, it was Shechina Medaberes Mitoich Groinai. So it goes like this: Moshe Rabbeinu, ve'Aaron b'Koyanov, and Aaron when he acted as a Kohen, u'Shmuel b'Koyrei Shemoi, and Shmuel when he said his own name. These are three instances of Shechina Medaberes Mitoich Groinam. But what? Only the Gaon. What? Hashem told him. Hashem, he did. He opened up his mouth. And Shechina Medaberes Mitoich Groinam. The name Shmuel was Shechina Medaberes Mitoich Groinam. Hashem said it. Hashem said it. So, Rabbi Glatstein, I think the Ikar Nakuda that we're learning, the Mahalach of the Vilna Gaon and the Maral, is that there is a fundamental difference between the first four books and Devarim. The first four books are Shechina Medaberes Mitoich Groinai. Why? So that Klal Yisrael should be makir that these are not Moshe's own words, but rather this is Rebbeinu Shalom talking. Once Moshe Rabbeinu accomplished that, and we realized that these are the words of Rebbeinu Shalom, Moshe was cured, and now Moshe is able to relay the Nevuah to us the way all the other Nevi'im did. And yet that Nevuah is on a higher level than the other Nevi'im. The other Nevi'im were Misnave Asbaklar She'ena Meira, and Moshe Rabbeinu was Asbaklar HaMeira. And yet, the way Moshe Rabbeinu arranges the psukim is Nitain Lidaresh. Why Moshe Rabbeinu juxtaposes certain psukim? That's why the Gemara says in Yevamos that even the man the Amar that is not Dorish Smuchim is Dorish the Mishnah Torah, and that's why Mishnah Torah is called Sifroi. It's Moshe's Sefer. The rest of the Torah is the Sefer of Hashem. It doesn't make it less Kedusha. It doesn't make it of a lower level, but it is fundamentally different, and that's why we are not mafsik in the klalos of the first four books of Vayikra, and we could be mafsik in the klalos of Mishnah Torah. Marv Rabbi Glatstein, have a wonderful day. Shkaya.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.